What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod. Once again, giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan with my co-host Dave Martin Swagger. What it do, baby?
Yo, fun guy, how you doing this fine Tuesday?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about all the good content. We got lots of interesting musical projects that came out this past week. A couple of TV shows we're going to be talking about, as well as another Pixar classic. But first, before we jump into any of that, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod and subscribe to the podcast in all the ways you like to listen to it there. And if you don't mind, go to iTunes and give us that 5-star rating and review. It really helps us out. Also, go to twitter.com, all of our tweets and stuff that we don't talk about on the pod, at nostalgiapod. We're going to start today, though, Dave, with someone who's pretty much dominated 2019 so far, with a song that actually came out in late 2018. And we talked about it on the podcast. Old Town Road by Lil Nas X has been sweeping the nation. Probably the most popular song that came out this year by far, I'd say.
Easily. It's number one in the country for the 12th straight week. That's only the 20th song to even have that long of a run, the longest since Despacito back in 2017. So it's been a while. That song has been this ubiquitous, for sure.
And Lil Nas X, very underground, just 18, hadn't really put out even a lot on to SoundCloud at this point before the song blew up. So we finally got his first EP, 7, coming out this past Friday. What was it, only 8 songs, 2 of which were Old Town Road and the remix of it. So really only 7 songs. What did you think of this 19-minute project from this young star?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly complicated. It really depends on how you want to look at it. And as you said, because he's, I guess, easily the biggest star to rise out of TikTok. Like, he started out as a meme. Old Town Road is still a meme, but was a meme first before it actually became a legitimate song. And we talked about the genre classification of it with the country charts before. Check that out, youtube.com/nostalgiapod. But yet now, as we said, he's established himself as a musical force at the moment. And he was just on BET Hip Hop Awards. That's what this image is from. And it's like, now what do we make of it? Because this is a pretty quick turnaround. You have a big number one hit, followed up with a project. Cardi B, for example, took a lot longer to release an album after Bodak Yellow, for example. But what do we make of Lil Nas X with this EP? And ultimately, I think it's successful because it's giving his fans what they want. It's genre blending music made for the masses. It's like the new sound of pop music. So I think because that's what made him famous, he's trying to replicate that again. I think there is enough here to do that, and whether this formula will last forever for him is a different conversation. But I think for right now, this was good enough. What about you?
Yeah, it's incredibly shallow, which is the big knock. So there's almost like no substance except for that. All Lil Nas X was trying to do with these 7 songs is really find something else that could catch a little bit of, ride the wave of Old Town Road. And I think a couple of songs here have the potential to do that. And I think they're good enough where they're just catchy enough. He definitely has, a knack for melody. And it's fun. Like, these songs, you don't take this project very seriously. And I think the shallowness comes from, one, he's a very new star. And he's 18 years old. He probably doesn't have a lot to say at this point.
Well, I think he's 19 now. Let's not shortchange the man.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So he's still finding, I think, what his voice will be. And it makes sense that right now these songs are going to sound like they're just trying to be what Old Town Road was. I do give him credit because, unlike some other stars that have, or rap stars, I should say, that have attempted to go into rock or use rock as a vehicle for some of their songs, I think he actually did it in a bit more of a genuine way than, say, someone like, Lil Wayne.
There you go. Sure.
And I think he actually even did it better than Cudi did in his early attempts. So,
yeah.
I give him some credit for that. What songs off this stood out to you or that you liked?
Yeah, so I thought the rock songs sounded fine. They're definitely my least favorite stuff on here of the new stuff. Again, only
Hmm.
like 6 new songs really, but um, Ryan Tedder's involved in one of those. Travis
Hmm.
Barker, it's like it's a little boilerplate. It's fine.
Hmm.
But because he's dipped his toes into this, you might as well keep going with that. I guess fine. But I think the clear standouts for me were Panini, which was the second single now and released that right day before the whole EP, and Closure, You Like, the
Hmm.
second to last track. Those are two of my favorites. I thought Panini, um, he definitely did not try to make that country at all. That's just very like Travis Scott esque. I think that song
Yeah.
just sounds really great, and he unintentionally interpolated Nirvana in Bloom specifically, which is just hilarious. It kind of speaks to the uh, generational gap between himself and anyone who was actually listening to Nirvana in the early '90s and whatnot. Just hilarious. And then Closure, that there's like a little dance beat to that. I think that song, even though like it might be kind of a weak hook, I think it just sounds good and it's
Hmm.
catchy. And ultimately, that's all he was going for with this. I think Columbia Records and him, they just kind of partnered, gave him some producers, and be like, hey, not Mr. X, like let's just chase some more streams. And he's joked about this on Twitter, and he's very much online, and he's
Yeah.
aware that like people will. I mean, like Pitchfork gave him a pretty rough review, and he like quote tweeted it and just kind of clowned on it because that's what he's going to do. So
Hmm.
ultimately, I think it's what those songs particularly are my highlights, and I think they kind of are like the best path forward for me. Like I thought Rodeo, the Cardi B feature was cool. I think that's more legitimization than anything else. I
Hmm.
don't think the feature is actually that great on its own. But yeah, it's those songs I think are decent enough. What about you? Which ones did you like?
Yeah, actually, I mean, thinking about the moments I'll probably remember, Panini stood out as well. And I did like Rodeo, not so much for the Cardi verse, which is fine, but just that drop, where like the beat finally comes in, it's just really like a moment. And I've already seen people making memes out of it, like characters dancing to it and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
just those things that are gonna like catch the internet and drive his stardom forward, I think that could be one of them. I wasn't as much of a fan of Closure as you were, but I do think that any of these songs are made in a way where they could potentially catch on, except for what probably Bring You Down. I'd say maybe not.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Um, but yeah, Lil Nas X. I don't think he's going to be going anywhere. I think we'll be hearing from him very online, like you said.
Yeah. One last note: Rodeo is one of 2 songs produced by Take a Date Trip, who most famously produced Mo Bamba. And actually, if you listen to Rodeo, the chanty moments of the
Mm-hmm.
non-Cardi sections of the song definitely will give you a Mo Bamba vibe. So I know friend of the show, Adam Mahalik, actually made that note and before he even made that producer connection. So that's interesting. And I think those are probably um, the biggest producers on here on like the hip hop side. So I'm actually just very curious, like, will he pick a direction of which he introduced several on this brief EP, or will he continue to just do all kinds of weird shit? And if it's produced well enough with the label support, it probably will be. Is that good enough? Like, well, I'm just curious. Will his fans, and again, there's tons of them already, will they be happy if he keeps being a hodgepodge of sorts? We'll see. Again, he's very young.
Absolutely. Uh, a duo that isn't as young, the Underachievers, man. We talked about them last year with After the Rain, which we panned a little bit. We weren't so high on it. I think our main criticism, if I'm remembering correctly, was mostly that the music was just very middling. Like it didn't have a ton of energy. We felt like they didn't really know which direction they wanted to go in with the album, and for that reason, it kind of came out very mediocre. Lords of the Flatbush 3 came out this past Friday, and I'm a lot more impressed with this album than I was After the Rain. Before I jump into why, I was wondering what was your just initial temperature on the album after listening to it?
Yeah, and as you said, I think the reason we didn't really like After the Rain, and I've been a UA fan a long time, heard all their stuff, and After the Rain stood out for being really their first project of any kind to really try and be a much more lyrical project. Not to say they haven't had lyrics; they've always had good bars, and that's certainly the case now. But farming out some hooks from guests, which is pretty uncommon for them, and making more moodier songs, as the title might suggest, was definitely a new direction for them. But as you said, I just didn't think it landed. So Lords of Flatbush 3, the third in a Flatbush series of tapes they've had. And it's definitely a course correction of sorts, but it's really just getting back to what got them all their fans in the first place, which is just this fucking Brooklyn heat. Like, these guys have rapid fire flows and lots of bars, and they can rap really fast and just make fucking hard ass songs. And I think it might, once again, I don't think this stands out the way a lot of their projects haven't as like a great project, but you always can take away a banger or two from just about every UA project. And I think that's the case once again. But what impressed you more about this, considering After the Rain was really your first like full dive in pre the Beast Coast album, of course?
Yeah, well, if you listen to some of their older stuff, which I did prior to After the Rain, just kind of go back to it. It reminded me a lot of their sound on Indigoism, which is, obviously Soul Theory or Herb Shuttles, Gold Soul Theory or Herb Shuttles were kind of like the two big hits off that. And it sounds a lot like that, where they just went back to these like harder beats. They were coming, flying at you with all these really crafty verses. And like you said, I don't think their ability to spit a verse ever really dropped off, but just the way that they were delivering these songs and what they're going for in them. I just preferred this Underachievers more than the kind who are making this moody. It sounded very, actually thinking about After the Rain now, almost like more pop oriented. Like I think we talked about how they were trying to almost like become a little more mainstream with that. And I think going back to what they do best was just a great move.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because since After the Rain, of course, we had the Beast Coast album, which we reviewed, and Issa and AK are only just a small part of that, obviously being a duo out of this bigger collective. But there are some moments on Escape from New York, the Beast Coast album, that you see them trying new things. I think Issa in particular really stood out on that album to me. Like Snow in the Stadium, for example, was a Jamaican Caribbean reggae inspired song, and you hear Issa using that kind of inflection and delivering a flow. You never really heard that from him, right? And then you still get like the bangers that we always expected from them on songs like Distance. Can't Hear You Talk, I Speak Guapanese is probably the most fan favorite of all the bars off the Beast Coast album. So I was kind of expecting them to get back to this direction with this tape. Again, it's coming out pretty soon. It's like a month after the Beast Coast album. So maybe they could have saved it a little bit. Again, it's less than a half an hour. I guess it's just they just wanted to put it out. That's cool. And they're doing the tour, so they just have more songs to pick from, I guess. But yeah, like again, I don't think this stood out to me as like the big leap that we've always wanted UA to take, but it's more back to the basics that they've been very good at for almost a decade now. So did you have any songs that stood out to you with that in mind?
I really like Debo.
Yep,
that was a really good track. Also the one right after it, No Detectives, I thought was pretty catchy with the hook. And also Tokyo Drift stood out to me. I really like that track as well. Which one stood out to you?
Yeah, I also like Debo. I think Debo and maybe even Stone Cold as well, which were the first two singles. Those songs just stand out to me as at a UA, like a solo UA show when they're just playing just as the duo. Those will just like be in the rotation now because those songs will sound great live, and like most of their songs do. I also really like Pax. The funny thing is Pax is actually a single they put out as a Lucy back in 2017, but I've obviously been a fan of that for a while. And I think that, again, I think Issa in particular has always stood out as being a little more versatile than AK, but he usually does most of the hooks, and his ability to just have different flows, I think, really stands out. And even if a lot of their verses ultimately probably sound a little similar, if you listen to Lords of Flatbush 3, you're not really paying attention, it'll just kind of flow really, really fast for you. I think it's just more of what the fans like. And that's certainly good enough because I think they, again, as I said, the Beast Coast album gave them a little more room for experimentation. So it's cool just to flood the zone once again for the hardcore fans.
Underachievers returning to form after a bit of a disappointing 2018 album with Lords of Flatbush 3. We listened to the new Mannequin Pussy album, Patience. I wasn't really too aware of them. Went back and listened to their discography, and it was actually pretty interesting to hear where this Philly punk rock band was when they dropped their first album back in 2014, Gypsy Pervert GP on Spotify, and then Romantic 2 years later, and now Patience 3 years after that, this is a band that seems to be really finding their stride and really finding their voice. And Patience, I think, is probably I don't listen to a ton of punk rock, but this is probably my favorite punk rock album of 2019, pretty easily. And not only is this an album that I think is a pretty interesting commentary on abusive relationships and all of the kind of issues and topics related to surrounding it, but I think it's a really like a coming out for this Philly group that I feel like is going to have quite a future in the punk rock and probably just the rock scene in general moving forward. It actually kind of reminds me a little bit of listening to Parquet Courts last year. Not necessarily in terms of style, but just in terms of where this band is at.
Sure.
Parquet Court's a little bit more established at that point in their career, but how did you feel about Patience from Mannequin Pussy?
Yeah, so I also just ran back the whole discography, especially once I realized, oh wait, their other two albums are like 20 something minutes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very easy to do.
Yep.
And also, like you, I certainly don't listen to a lot of really any contemporary punk rock music. So take what I say with a grain of salt for sure. I don't only really have what I bring from like classic, 80s and 90s stuff, I guess. But I thought GP and then Romantic, I don't want to say it felt like unfinished what they were sounding like, but
No, sure.
that sounds too negative. But it just felt like they were still kind of finding themselves. And what really stood out to me initially was I just did not like the vocal mix really at all. And like it's very punk rock. There's like lots of drums, like really hard drums, right? And like that energy is there throughout all these albums. But I feel like the vocals just didn't get there for me initially. So it's really kind of hard to really like grasp a lot of these songs for me. But then on Patience, as you said, quite dark if you really try and listen and dive into that, and definitely fits the jamming nature of the instrumentation. So even though it's not my genre of choice, it just kind of stands out because it's, I think Patience, they finally, and again, this again my very brief introduction to the band, but they finally seem to have kind of got that mix right of the singing with the instrumentation, and of course the lyrics continuing to evolve as their story has continued. So very, very interesting, and I agree. I think the future is certainly quite bright. I mean, if you look at their Spotify, I mean, they don't even have any song. They have one song with 1 million streams. Like they're very, very nascent group in the national consciousness. So it's gonna be interesting to see just how big they can be, And there's certainly not a lot of punk rock on the mainstream festival circuit. I wonder if that'll change, because this lead up to this album did get a lot of press, online, attention, and they're now on a new label, Epitaph, which is still independent label. So I'm not sure how big they might grow off that, but be very interesting. And I'm quite curious, even if punk rock in 2019 is not my first go to. What about you?
No, I want to kind of circle back to what you were saying about their last two albums. Gypsy Pervert specifically sounded to me like, I mean, there were a lot of tracks on there that were under a minute, just them really like jamming, kind of just capturing that punk rock vibe. But I'm not sure if the way that the sound was mixed in general, but also that, the instruments were arranged made much sense in terms of getting across the point of the song. And maybe there wasn't a point. I'm not inside their head. I can't say that for sure, but it did sound a bit like just a mishmash of things. Not really like there was an idea there. Where Patience comes in is there's a focus. They obviously kind of figured out, I think, how to use the drums and both guitarists really effectively. And I think, let me just find her name here real quick. Marisa Debis, the vocalist, and also she's a guitarist on this album and for the band in general. I think her voice shines through so clear in this in terms of what the point of the songs are, what she's trying to get across. It really just feels like this is a band who has been honing their craft for the last couple of years and is finally like, all right, this is what we've been working up to. I think there's a lot of songs off here that are really good, but I feel like the first half, basically from the first track to High Horse, are just really, really strong. Specifically Drunk 2, Cream, and Fear and Desire. That like three song That's just really, really, really strong in my book. What song stood out to you?
I agree. I think ultimately, what Cream, Drunk 2, Drunk 1, probably my favorite ones. What also jumped out to me when
Mhm.
listening to the early stuff was just they have some really funny song titles like Meat Slave, things like that. Very, and again, it fits the aesthetic. It fits the death metal waters they dip into at times, I guess. So good for them. They definitely feel very authentic.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I think ultimately it did blend a little bit for me, but I think that's just because I'm not really used to hearing uh, drums this hard that often. But I thought it
Yeah,
sounded good front to back, which is I think half the battle when you're making music that is explicitly not for the mainstream.
sure, definitely. High Horse also a song that I think really stood out to people. Uh, for the content, I think mostly, and kind of the ending of it, where she's talking about this abusive relationship with this guy, and at the end she's like on her high horse, walking away from this like burning scene. Just very like metaphorical. The imagery is very clear, very strong. Um, I'm really impressed with this album, and I'm not sure if it'll make an end of year list for me, but I think it'll probably be in contention. So one I definitely want to revisit in a couple of months to see if it has that lasting power for sure. Um, if you want to check out a couple of songs from the albums we talked about, plus the one we're about to talk about, go to our Spotify playlist, Nowstalgia Best of 2019. Hit that follow because we're definitely going to be adding a couple Raconteurs albums on here. We've talked a lot about Jack White's solo career, Boarding House Reach, which came out last year. Whew, that
Weird
was
one.
quite the album. Jack White rapping, not something I think many people wanted. Now he's back with the Raconteurs. Last album was 2008's Consolers of the Lonely. Before that, Broken Boy Soldiers. Uh, it's interesting. So I know you went back and listened to the Raconteurs to kind of get a sense before you listen to this album. What was your just overall take on them as a band?
Well, I definitely liked the sound of the Raconteurs much more than the sound of solo Jack White pre-boarding house reach, which of course is much more jarring, relative
Mhm.
like anything else he'd done before, electronic influence, as you said. But like Blunderbuss, Lazaretto, the
Mhm.
post White Stripes solo Jack White stuff, never really did much for me. And despite the fact that he's obviously been a master guitarist on basically everything he's been on, but like hearing Broken Boy Soldiers in particular, which also does predate Blunderbuss by 6 years, so it makes sense he changed. But like that I gotta say, like that's probably my favorite rock
Yeah.
album I've heard um, in a very long time. Specifically, like
Hmm.
that came out in '06. I really was struggling to come up with a rock album that was newer that I actually liked more. Um, and I didn't like Concerts of Lonely quite as much, but I still think like those guys just fucking rock, and they rock in the
Yeah.
way I've always liked because they sound a little more old school, just in the way they sing and they mix in the guitars, and obviously it's hard shit the whole time. So I was a big fan. Then hearing Help a Stranger, um, again I don't like it as much as the first one, but still sounded really great. And I just I like to hear like more traditional hard rock once in a while because it just and even if this gets into more like jammy, like I don't know, like what garage rock or and then they slow down in sections too, but
Mhm.
I think it's just this is the type of rock music that you don't hear that often, especially from the big bands that are still around. So very refreshing for me. But I mean,
Sure.
obviously you've been a Raconteurs fan a long time. What did you think? Because it's not really a Jack White solo outfit, nor is it a White Stripes outfit. It's very much its own thing that Jack White's just a part of. So do you think it delivers on that promise? As being one of the side projects.
Sure. Um, yeah, what I really like about Jack White with the Rockin' Tours is it gets him into a sweet spot of his guitar ability, which is blues rock, which I think he just does fantastically. I mean, he's a pretty big Nashville guy, if I'm correct, and Detroit as well. But when he taps into that bluesy side of himself, I feel like that brings out some of the best guitar work that he does, as well as some of his best songwriting. And while I think some of the topics on this album are, I don't know, a bit off putting just because he's so anti technology and that was a lot of what was on Boarding House Reach was just how like basically like a Black Mirror album in a sense.
Just not as smart as it thinks it is.
Right, exactly, and it just feels very old. I think when Jack White gets around the rest of the Raconteurs, he just taps into something that he really thrives with. And I think the best example of that for me is there's two songs, Some Days and Now That You're Gone, I feel like are just two of the strongest tunes on here. And not only is it the songwriting, but just the overall crafting of it, you know, like that thumping at the end of Now That You're Gone, where it's just the kick drum is like fucking awesome. And obviously Jack White, even when he's at his worst, is still an amazing guitarist, and that doesn't change here. But where he picks and chooses to deliver those solos, I feel like is so much more affecting than on a lot of his solo stuff. So something about being part of the Raconteurs just really, I think, brings out the best of him. What other songs stood out to you, or what moments did you like on this album?
I definitely really like Now That You're Gone as well. A song, I think it's the last song we added to our 2018 playlist because it was an early single, but still fucking goes hard now. That's definitely my favorite one. And as you said, like it's just really nice to hear Jack White still be able to like recuse himself from his, I don't know, personal insecurities, whatever it might be. And like we have like Tech Woke, who's incredibly famous, incredibly connected in the music industry. Like he's, you know, cross genre in terms of the people he hangs out with and even works with. So it's just great to hear him. I don't want to say get back to what he does best, because it's not quite exactly that, but it's just refreshing to hear him still deliver.
Absolutely,
given how long he's been in the game. So I love it.
Yeah, one last song I wanted to highlight was just Shine the Light on Me. It's like a piano ballad, and I feel like it has this really awesome ending where Jack White's just basically like playing the piano and screeching the title of the song. Really, really awesome moment. Definitely recommend this Raconteurs album, and again, check out our Spotify Best of 20 Nowstalgia Best of 2019 playlist to check out the songs on that we liked. Some good albums that we talked about this week, which is always nice, and some good TV as well. Let's start with Euphoria. Zendaya. Man, my first question is either I'm just a major lame, or my high school was a major lame, or if this is how high school is now, it's fucking wild, bro.
I had a similar observation, and I was kind of reflecting. You know, we've gotten the modern high school portrayed a few ways differently. Booksmart, this show, of course, Across the Pond on sex education. We've got a lot of like 2018, 2019 Gen Z high school experience, right? And I really just think it's just even if it's not quite as extreme as portrayed in these shows and movies, it's just different. Like there's a different generation of kids in high school right now. They all have smartphones. That was certainly not the case when we were in high school. And I think it's just a much more liberal atmosphere. You know, like the students. I don't think students are just as policed in big schools. You know, and I think I got a little bit of that in my high school experience. But it's it is interesting to see, even if it's being very over dramatized. But I had a similar thought race through my head for sure.
Yeah, so I guess before we jump too far into it, we'll be talking a little bit more about those crazy moments. Euphoria, a show on HBO with showrunner Sam Levinson, based on an Israeli series of the same name, which was created by Ron Lesham, Daphne Levin, and Tamira Yardeni, starring Zendaya and a lot of other younger actors, as well as Eric Dane, who you might know as McDreamy from Grey's Anatomy. Don't ask me how I know that.
Wait, I thought McDreamy was Patrick Dempsey. He's someone else?
Oh, fuck. There's so many Mick whatevers on that. McSteamy, maybe he is.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
You'll notice we don't have any Grey's reviews on the channel. You can stop watching if that bothers you.
Imagine if we reviewed every season of Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah,
I don't know if
McDreamy
that's
is Patrick
Dempsey.
Dempsey. I was right. Nailed it.
Wait, check out what Eric Dane is though.
Eric
Pull that up.
Dane.
Um. Anyways, as you're looking that
McSteamy.
up,
Yep, you got it.
McSteamy, yeah.
Sorry.
Anyways, uh, this show is incredibly stylish.
Yep.
The color palette of the show, the shots, the setting is all like pretty breathtaking, actually. Especially there's some moments where uh, scenes are influenced by drugs that were taken by the characters within the scenes, and there's a lot of really interesting animation with that. But it also tackles so many heavy topics. It's kind of crazy. I mean, just within the first 2 episodes, and we're reviewing the first two, we missed the premiere last week. We have drug addiction, we have mental health issues, trauma, death of a parent, pornography, sexuality, abuse, neglect, assault, sexual assault. I mean, and I'm probably missing a couple in there.
Yep.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, man. And I think to that point about the visuals of it all, and I guess even exploring many themes. Sam Levinson, who pretty nascent as a director, a showrunner, but son of Barry Levinson, as you might guess. His feature film debut was last year. That was Assassination Nation, and that was a film that I shared my thoughts on last year, and I thought it had a lot of interesting ideas, and it definitely had some cool visuals, but didn't really work. And him bringing his sensibilities to Euphoria, combined with the partnership and presence of A24 Television, this is their first scripted show they've done with HBO. You can definitely tell that there's a pedigree behind this show, and even if it is an adaptation, as you said, it definitely seemed that there was an intent to explore a lot of things, which we'll get into, but also just make the show incredibly engaging. That even if these explicit moments or wild scenes aren't exactly what you want to see for a show about high school kids, it's really hard to take your eyes off the show.
Yeah.
Whether it's something as obvious as like drug trips or just the everyday, like it looks fucking great.
Yeah.
And I think that's also important because most of the show is unknown actors, especially to the HBO audience. I mean, Zendaya is quite famous, and it's certainly a change of gears for her, given that she came up as a Disney star and is probably most well known right now for I don't know, being a online force as well as part of Spider-Man at the moment. But this is definitely a statement of intent on her part as well to shed that label quickly and branch off in her career. Something we've seen, Ariana, Selena Gomez, all the Disney Channel, all the Nickelodeon stars. They all do at some point, but it's just kind of cool to see her do this before, like, I think she's 20 years old. Like she's quite young, but a lot of thought clearly went into this show. She's 22, by the way.
Yeah. To your point about, making it engaging. So even if what you're watching is not something you want to watch, but you can't stop. I found myself that way in the second episode a lot of the time, especially. There's moments where Nate, who's played by Jacob Elordi, lady, where he is like beating the absolute living shit out of this guy whose house he broke into. And he's basically like telling the guy, like, you raped somebody, when that wasn't actually what happened at all. That I was just like, this is appalling. But like the way that it was filmed, the way that Elodie was so menacing in that scene, it was really captivating. Watching the scene with the drug dealer where Zendaya and Angus Cloud's Fezco, which, side note, Fezco and Angus Cloud in general looks a lot like Mac Miller. It's almost kind of, and he's been on the brain just a lot recently. But first of all, Fezco is an awesome character. But that whole scene was very much like almost like a horror film, the way it was shot and like led up. Very I don't know, scary, I guess.
Fentanyl in episode 2. Hope you're ready.
Well, I mean, even in the first episode, they show Zendaya passed out from a drug overdose. Pretty heavy stuff. Um, it's it's really engaging. I wonder how it's going to do ratings wise, because I could see, like you said, for HBO, this isn't necessarily the demographic that would be maybe searching for a show like this.
Yeah, and that it's funny you say that because there's been some hubbub recently about HBO using weird qualifiers to say that the show's a big ratings hit, even if Nielsen is a little more modest on. I think it's doing quite well, like a few million viewers, but it's certainly not a HBO smash per se. It's certainly not as high as I believe Succession got to by the end of that run last year. But the whole controversy of it all, which again we'll get into, I almost felt like it just really missed the plot because it's like kids don't fucking watch HBO. They literally never have. Like
Right.
kids have Netflix subscriptions. They'll soon have Disney Plus subscriptions. They like to go on streaming, but kids don't dive in and go through HBO. Like it's just not something that happens.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was like the stupidest non-controversy to talk about, you know, a show depicting teenagers with lots of penises and drugs. Like again, this is a show that was really it's meant for adults. And even
Right.
if like the kids that are might get something out of this commentary on the world they uh, occupy in a certain sense, they're not going to figure that out until they're a little older. Like that's just the
Right.
way these shows are made. So it's man, it's very it's a very interesting show, and I think the ratings are definitely a big part of it. But I mean, as you were saying with everything really with Nate in episode 2, the show did a great job of, and then the drug dealer scene, just great job at just building dramatic tension
Hmm.
and kind of keeping you guessing. And even if we're not seeing anything that's like super crazy, I suppose like it's a drug deal, it's a attack, like it's nothing we never seen before, but it really keeps you guessing. And I think that's the fact that it's already doing that 2 episodes in, keeping you on your toes in that way while being super engaging for what it actually does show you, gets a lot of points for me. So I'm very curious to see just what exactly they are shooting to achieve because we can tell the ambition is there. So like where are we headed is what I want to see.
Yeah. That's a great question. I was thinking about like what I feel like the overall message of the show is. Like you said, this is a show that it's about teenagers geared towards adults. I mean, even within like the first, I think the first 10 seconds, Zendaya's character talks about how she was born 3 days after 9/11, and I don't know if a lot of children in high school, potentially, or a lot of young adults in high school are thinking about the time that they were born and how that impacts their worldview and the experiences that they have. Maybe I can't say because I think it's definitely a more thoughtful generation than ours was and a more open one.
Yep.
But it's it's going to be interesting because there's so many different topics that they're talking about and so many things that they could touch on at this point. Um, I think it's going to be hard for them to land every single one and whatever point they're trying to make with every single one. But I think it seems like an overall message is going to be the destruction that all these different vices can have on the psyche of someone on this age right now and at this point in their life, especially
Mhm.
17 going to 18, this transition.
Yep.
Any characters or moments that really have stood out for you?
I think obviously Rue stands out. She
Mhm.
commands majority of the action, but I think my favorite part about what they're doing with her character right now is that Zendaya is giving lots of like voiceover narration
Mhm.
regarding scenes she's not actually really in, and I think it's an effective way thus far to move the plot and uh, kind of keep the threads going. Whether that's done to like avoid shock value moments and whether it feels empty down the line, I can still see that being the case. But right now, I like the way they're using her to just kind of move things going, like the pornography bit from episode 2, for example. I think the way she kind of just explains how it spread through the school is a quicker way to keep the show moving. Because honestly, there is a bit of a deep ensemble of young adults quite
Yeah.
quickly. So, like, I still don't know all the names. I'll be honest,
Mhm.
but they're clearly setting it up to be around Zendaya and Nate and Zendaya's friend, who's now talking to Nate
Jules.
inadvertently. I forget her name.
Jules.
So I think those are the three that I think are the most interesting. But we'll see if
Yeah,
any other supporting characters get big enough moments to stand out.
yeah. There's an interesting thing just going on Wikipedia because I want to get all the actors' names for Jules, who
Jules.
uh, is played by. Let me just find it here. Hunter Schafer. She's described on the character is described as being transgender
Yeah.
on Wikipedia, which I don't remember being talked about on the show yet.
Nope.
Which seems like it'll be another interesting topic that will kind of come to light. Obviously, her relationship with Nate through text or this chat app,
Yeah.
and Nate's dad also is going to be probably a pretty
Mhm.
interesting subplot. Um, a really funny moment I had in episode 2 was when Zendaya uh, was talking about taking drugs, and she's like, it's not good to say, but drugs, they're kind of fucking cool. Like, I just like laughed out loud at that because it's like such a blunt way to like state this thing that she knows that she shouldn't say as a character. And then that whole scene where her and Jules, took the drugs and like they have all the colors and they see like this like trip almost in a sense. I thought was really really well done. Also, the whole party that they had at the end of episode 1, I felt was really gripping, especially when Nate corners Jules. Then she pulls the knife out and it has her whole moment where she like cuts herself. Pretty interesting stuff there. So if you haven't watched Euphoria yet, I would say catch up and keep up with it because I have a feeling it's going to be garnering a lot of attention as more and more pretty hefty and shocking moments come out of the season.
Yeah, I'm expecting more from Storm Reed, who plays Gia, Zendaya's Rue's younger sister in the show. Obviously, Storm Reed's a bit of a rising child star right now, so I would assume she's going to have some big moment coming. Also, it's, she has second billing on Wikipedia. Maud Apatow, Judd and
Mhm.
Leslie Mann's daughter, plays Lexi, who's like Zendaya's friend who, from growing up, they kind of separated and she pissed for her in episode 1. Like, she
Yes.
hasn't had a whole lot going on, like really just a handful of scenes thus far, but it feels like she has more coming. So I think there's great potential that this could be a really impressive ensemble where they uh, everyone gets their due. It's just a question of, as we said, like, is there an overlying message? Will we get there in a way that feels satisfying? And even if it doesn't, the show's really great to watch, just and even just
Mhm.
look at. So I'm actually not really that worried, regardless of what happens.
Yeah, I think similarly to Euphoria, Legion on FX, uh, just a season 3 premiere last night. Obviously directed and the showrunner Noah Hawley's kind of in charge of everything with this. Uh, we don't necessarily watch Legion the same way I think you can watch Euphoria just for the moments. We watch Legion for the weirdness and for the the style and just being a part of this this strange world that's so fun and interesting to be a part of. And I think this season 3 premiere last night, obviously the final season, uh, really leaned into that weirdness. And there's always been kind of like a 60s overtone to the show, especially in terms of like costumes and it almost seems like time period as well. But they really leaned into the psychedelic aspect of the 60s in this one where uh, you know, Dan Stevens, who plays um, God, why don't I David Haller,
David Holler.
is almost like the leader of like this 60s s cult uh, ran by Lenny, who is I don't know what is Lenny at this point. Just like
Chaos, bad person. I don't know.
yeah, it's
Aubrey
hard to
Plaza.
explain. Yeah, Aubrey Plaza, who is throwing 110 miles per hour, is always on the show.
Mhm.
Um, and part of the story about Switch, played by Lauren Tsai, who appears to be a major character for this season. She can her power is that she can time jump, turn back time, and her quest to find David and to team up with him and to join his team. Um, really, really interesting episode with I thought an amazing first 20 minutes of Switch trying to kind of find David. What did you think of the episode as a whole? And then maybe let's talk a little bit about what we're hoping for with this last season of Legion.
Yeah, so I thought it honestly, I think it's the best Legion premiere of the 3 seasons, and I mean the visuals have never faltered. That certainly didn't change now. It looks awesome, and just the originality of a lot of visuals always just stand out to me. Like the way they communicated time travel through these doors with units of time on them.
Yeah.
Really just a smart way that obviously probably is like a genius level thing from a TV production standpoint and a way to cheaply communicate that. But it looks awesome and kind of just fits the overall way of the way they present abstract things physically, literally for the characters. I've always liked that about the show. But what stood out to me, obviously, about this kind of feels like a bit of a course correction in terms of the criticisms a lot of people had of season 2. While it was still great to look at and the acting was still superb, of course, the plot just felt very listless in season 2, and direction just wasn't clear about where we were going or if there was even a point. And that's belabored ground enough to go back into that. But I feel like this season 3 premiere, effectively demonstrated that David is clearly the bad guy. We know what happens after the great season 2 finale, and the rest of the people we've come to know are going after him, seemingly to kill him. I'm sure that'll change or get tweaked as we go. Farouk is still present with them, which is still mind-boggling that he's just with the good guys now. And so we certainly don't believe he's a good guy, but they've clearly established the plot for this season, and whether Holly committed to it and actually tells the story as this literally remains to be seen, obviously. But I just like that they kind of just very quickly established where we are and perhaps where we are going, while still having all the normal strengths. So I like the premiere a lot.
Yeah, Dan Stevens has a lot to do as David in this because, like you said, he's clearly the villain, but he's also been the protagonist for the whole show. So he's, I think, still very liked by the fans, even if the way season 2 ended maybe positioned him to not be so likable. Well, like you said, Farouk being part of this team is like part of the good guys. This is absurd in so many ways, but I think that's the thing the show does really well is it gives you a lot of unexpected, even if sometimes maybe a bit telegraphed, but still like these unexpected team ups and things happening. Like when the team came in and killed David at the end of the episode, or I guess in the middle of the episode, I did not see that coming at all. And I also thought he was gonna like totally, even after he lost his arm and they had put that thing I said, I thought he was totally gonna just like demolish them. And then Sid comes in and kills him, and Switch turns back time and goes and tells him. And I was like, wow, that was one. It was kind of like the beginning of Avengers in a sense, like when they just go and they kill Thanos like the first 10 minutes.
I mean, bring it back even a little bit. The source material is X-Men. It's Days of Future Past.
Right. True. Yeah. Good call. But it's just such a fun show to watch, and there's so many weird things going on. Yeah, it's just I really enjoy this show, even if it's probably season 2 obviously had some issues, and we talked about that, but it's still just always pleasurable. Even if the episodes are listless, you're like, wow, that visual's cool. Like you talked about, the way that they depict ideas is cool. And I really like a lot of the characters on this show. I mean, Sid got very little screen time, but I really enjoy her as a character. We have just this whole bevy of people in the upcoming episodes. It seems like we're going to get a lot of David kind of exploring his own past through Switch's abilities, and I'm really excited to see when he meets Professor X, played by Harry Lloyd, Viserys Targaryen, later on in the season.
Yeah,
kind of what that encounter will be like. I feel like that's going to be fucking epic. What do you expect of this season?
Expectations. I really don't. I don't know how you can really have any. I hope that we get some kind of finality of a sense. And again, that is the promise of this premiere just gives me hope that there might be a little more plot than season 2. So again, could very well change. But I'm just looking for just some kind of bookend to David's arc. Obviously, his arc is the most integral to the show thus far. I'm sure Sid will be very much involved with that, and Lenny as well. But I just don't want it to like kind of just end and people be like, "That's it," or like, or I wanted more. Obviously, it's been a talking point recently with a lot of shows ending this year, notably Thrones. But you know, anything just to give it any kind of finality. And if it's an FX show, John Landgraf deserves a lot of credit for letting this show exist the way in the form it is. Yes, Marvel TV helps produce the show. Noah Hawley's attached, and he has a relationship with FX, but it's not like a ratings juggernaut or anything.
No.
So I have a feeling that just creatively, they didn't really give any notes at all. They just be like, yeah, do whatever, man. Final season, go for it. So I hope it's what Hawley wanted to do, and I hope he had a good plan for a good idea. This came out a little over a year after season 2 ended, so it was a pretty quick turnaround. So we'll see. I mean, do you have any thoughts on where you want it to go?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to see finality for David. I also definitely want to see what the whole deal is with Farouk, which I know you mentioned when we did the review, but shout out to, man, I lost my place again. Navid Nagabam, who was the Sultan in Aladdin. He's always electric when he's on screen as well, and the whole scene with switching him like in that or like mind space that he brought her to, I thought was really, really cool. I'm hoping to see a showdown between them again, and also I think it would be really interesting to see them explore a little bit of David's past, because he was talking about how he was adopted and things like that, and in this episode, and just to kind of get some sense of like, I guess, some clarity on the past seasons, because I do feel like there's still almost this idea of like what was real and what wasn't, what was in David's head and what wasn't, and I think kind of getting some idea of like what is a coping mechanism for David and what is really him being controlled by Farouk or Lenny or whoever it is, would be really, really interesting.
Yeah, I'm also curious. Is Professor X's presence on the show just going to be via those going back in time moments, those flashbacks of sort, or will we actually see the series pull up in the present timeline and have an effect on the story? Could go either way.
Direct. Legion season 3. Check it out if you haven't been. Definitely enjoy pretty much anything Noah Hawley puts out right now. Let's talk about Toy Story, another I don't know, Pixar masterpiece, I guess. Sitting at 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's interesting because for a movie this good, a lot of the conversation surrounding it so far has been that this is a box office flop. So I think there's kind of two topics to talk about here. Not only the movie. I mean, it still made 120 million, but just below expectations for what they were hoping it to be. So I think there's a bit of a discussion around maybe why this movie didn't achieve box office success as much as it did, with the movie being as good as pretty much everybody says it is. Why don't we start with what our general thoughts were about the movie and move into maybe why it wasn't as popular. Did you like Toy Story 4?
Yes, I did. No, I liked Toy Story 4 quite a bit. I think I did not have like huge hype levels for the film, and I will get into, I think, how that might have affected the box office overall. But despite the fact that I thought Toy Story 3 was a fantastic conclusion, like the whole rest of the world, it's kind of nice to be back after almost a decade with these characters and these voice actors. But yeah, I liked it a lot. I think it was another great conclusion to the story, and once again presents in great Pixar fashion the existential crises that adults can find when they watch Pixar films that are also for children. So it does all the Pixar things that Pixar is so great at. So did you like it a lot?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Probably not my favorite Toy Story movie, but still a really enjoyable and kind of surprising in ways, Tal, because oh, uh, they gave a lot of time to characters that I didn't suspect that they would, in terms of especially like Bo Peep, um,
Yep.
but they made this very much like a Woody story, and I would assume this will probably be the last Toy Story movie. It seems to be kind of the thought of a lot of people out there, and if it is, I think it's a good send off. But I really felt like this movie was very funny. It was pretty action packed, and it didn't. I think, like you said, it didn't necessarily have the emotional highs in a good way of Toy Story 3, because Toy Story 3 was almost like traumatic, that scene in the incinerator. Like I still
Mhm.
think back to that and just do not enjoy that, sitting through that. But the emotional moments in this one were a lot more palatable in my opinion. Um, Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've been reflecting a lot on Toy Story 3, and I think it's probably my least favorite of the
Hmm.
quadrilogy now. Um, but I mean, they're all so great. So I mean, who cares how you rank them? I guess. But I mean,
Right.
yeah, Bo Peep was not in Toy Story 3 at all. And
Right.
bringing her back and really fleshing her out as a character, really the only side character outside of Buzz and Woody, and I guess Jesse to little lesser extent, it's been fleshed out at all. To be
Mhm.
honest, um, I thought she was really effective. That was great to see. Also interesting that Buzz kind of sidelined for about 2 acts of this film,
Yeah.
and you wonder how much of that is the presence of Tim Allen as the voice actor, not the most popular guy these days. He's just because of the things he said recently. Um,
Political views.
right. And the thing with Toy Story 4's existence, and we can talk about Pixar and its uh, barrage of sequels this decade, but from what everyone says, Toy Story 4 really only came to be because John Lasseter and Andrew Stanton, who directed the Legion premiere, funny enough, they kind of like secretly developed this movie and like basically finished an early script before Pixar even knew about it. And obviously, they excised Lasseter from the company eventually, given sexual misconduct allegations. But you wonder if this movie would ever have been attempted if it didn't have John Lasseter, of course, originally the director of the first two and the original force and face of Pixar in the early '90s and mid 2000s. I mean, he should deserves all the credit for making Pixar what it was, what it is today. Um,
Mhm.
and I think what people have been saying about Toy Story 5's potential existence is now that Andrew Stanton has uh, left Toy Story following his work on the script, and Lasseter, of course, is gone now, works for Skydance. Uh, is there anyone at Pixar who would really try like stump for a fifth Toy Story? Like, there's not a lot of ownership left for the people that are still there. So interesting thing to think about. But I mean, did you take away any of the negative headlines from the box office disappointment that was the third highest grossing opening weekend of the year? Did you? Because I think there's a lot of interesting reasons for that, even if the movie is still obviously going to be a huge hit, already is. It's a very fascinating movie, both meta and plot wise. Good stuff.
Sure. Um, yeah, I think the in terms of the box office issues, I buy into the theory about just sequel fatigue. Um, it's it's just like, how many times can we get really hyped up to see these, and especially when uh, we know it's going to be coming out, and we're going to be able to watch it in our homes, not have to go to the movie theater. For most people who don't buy subscriptions and pay, $13 to $20 to sit through a movie, plus 20 more bucks to eat a popcorn, drink soda. So in the past, where it was like Toy Story's coming out, got to get our kids to see it, it's like, we'll wait a couple months. They can watch these other three movies to tide them over, and then when it comes out on Netflix or HBO or Hulu, we'll watch it there. Um, I also think, in terms of something like Avengers, Star Wars, those are sequels where if you don't go see that right away, you're gonna have it spoiled. who cares about a Toy Story movie getting spoiled? You don't go to Toy Story for the plot and for the reveals and for
Yeah.
like the moments that like, whatever's going to happen in the last episode of the trilogy for Star Wars, people are going to be talking about it immediately. So if you don't see it right away, it's going to be like, all right, you're missing out. Toy Story, it's like, all right, we'll see it later and we'll enjoy it just as much as we could have 6 months ago.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too because I think Toy Story 4 ultimately has a very basically unopposed runway to make all the family kid money at the box office until Lion King comes out.
Yeah.
So you figure kids movies aren't necessarily appointment viewing, let the parents take them when they can. So who knows if this was an issue, and maybe if they release it a weekend earlier for Father's Day, it could have done better. They usually do go with that weekend, but Finding Dory opened about 15 million more than this a few years ago. Incredibles 2 just last year made 189 and went on to gross 1.2 billion worldwide. Toy Story 4 obviously is not hitting those marks. I think the reason for that is, Incredibles 2 was 13 years in the making.
Yep.
And Finding Dory, Finding Nemo was from what, 03, 04, whatever it is.
So 16.
Toy Story 3, again, everyone was so satisfied with it that you saw this with the trailers and like the early, it just felt like there was a muted lack of excitement for Toy Story 4. And it wasn't negative buzz the way Aladdin had, which also ended up not mattering at all for the sake of that movie. But you just feel like there wasn't a sense of urgency to go out and see Toy Story 4, which again, it's funny because we're saying all these things in a negative way, but the movie still is the third highest grossing opening weekend of 2019.
Yeah.
And it was opened in the most theaters ever for a animated film and the biggest global launch for an animated film. So quite the success. But it's interesting to see another sequel not meet expectations. I mean, like the forecasts were very high for this, and even the modest ones, it still missed by like 20 million. So not even Disney, not even Pixar is immune to what seems to be a waning theater going experience. But I think that's enough on the non-aspects of the film. Let you have more to add.
Just quick, I want to see how good you are with this. Toy Story, how much? Toy Story 3, how much do you think it grossed in the box office?
I know that Incredibles 2, Finding Dory, and Toy Story 3 were all billion-dollar movies worldwide. I know Toy Story 4, actually, the opening weekend, if you adjust for inflation, was less than Toy Story 3. But I'm sure you got the exact number.
Yeah, it's just right over $1 billion. It's that is kind of mind-blowing to me, just because when you think about Toy Story 4, maybe it will get there. Got quite a long road, and it does have a couple weeks, like you said, pretty free of any other movies. I mean, I'm sure for that, like, children who saw Toy Story 3 in theaters maybe when they were 5 years old are now 14 now, so they're probably going to want to go see Spider-Man when it comes out, and that will definitely cut into some of that like young teen interest. I don't know how many of them are going to see repeat showings of Toy Story 4 anyway, but it has a lot of runway to try to get up there. But still, like you said, box office down, and we say every summer, at least for the past like probably 5 or 6, movies are dying, and then it seems to always kind of pick back up. But this might be a trend to worry about. Going back to the film though, and things I was really impressed with, the animation, and there's been a lot of videos about it, but the animation in this is just unbelievable, and especially when you compare it to like Toy Story 1. And the image I've seen a lot of is the cat who's in the antique shop in this one compared to the dog from the first Toy Story.
Sure.
It's like so unbelievably so much better, the animation in this. And Bo Peep also has been getting a lot of attention in terms of how her glow up, and I just think the animation in these Pixar films is just unbelievable. One of the greatest achievements probably in like modern film in a lot of ways. I also really thought Bo Peep, just as a character in general, was really interesting and brought about a lot of interesting plot questions of like meaning, finding happiness, letting go of things, really driving Woody's character arc in this film forward, and just thought she was a delight as well. What other things stood out to you about the film?
Uh, I think what's getting a lot of love from the critics is Forky's presence in the show, which is or the movie, which is funny because Forky's relative arc and purpose for the story basically wraps up halfway through the movie.
Yep.
And he's voiced by Tony Hale, doing a great Buster, Jace voice performance, and Forky's yeah, very relatable for many people hearing "I'm trash." But Forky's presence in the show and his early uh, existential crisis. There's a lot of adult themes you can take from him, with his creationism and purpose and direction, and uh, it relates to Woody in a smart way. And I think that's always just been impressive about the best Pixar movies is that you can dig deep into the meaning if you want to. You don't have to enjoy the movie, and that's certainly once again the case here. But yeah, I thought Forky just was impressive because it's a new wrinkle to the movie, and it foreshadows the journey Woody will go on in the movie, where he's struggling to determine what his purpose now is, as a toy that's not as needed as he once was, and has also done did his time, put his dues in,
Right.
whatever. So that was basically my favorite thing. I thought, the way it ends, obviously the hits you in a feels moment. Obviously, it doesn't compare to the Toy Story 3 ending. No one would say that. But I think having Woody and Buzz get that send off and immediately following that up with a kid getting reunited with his parents, it's just kind of effective Pixar at its best. And it's very few animated films, even ones that try and be adult, like say the Lego movies. Very few animated films or films in general can even say they can balance the scales this way. So it's just I don't want to say it's more of the same. That sounds like I'm being very generic, but it's more of that greatness in a new way. I think Forky is really the reason that it works. But I mean, what else stood out to you besides the glow up from Bo and the great screen time she has for the first time, really.
Yeah, I thought Christina Hendricks as Gabby was very very well done, because she really is very menacing in that first, like, I don't know, half of the movie. And then that third act, you get to see a kind of a little bit more of the softer side. And it feels like a very like fleshed out villain for the movie in a lot of senses. I also think the mannequins she has with her were like really creepy.
Oh yeah,
and I hated their presence, but I felt like that kind of added this nice nice sense of horror. And when they tried to talk, oh god, I hated that so much. I thought the action scenes were really awesome, and I mean, shout out Nuke Kaboom. Keanu Reeves just continuing
Summer of Keanu, man.
Yeah, everything he does at this point is fantastic. But I really enjoyed Nuke Kaboom, especially his final jump, where he closed his eyes and just went for it. Freaking hilarious. Yeah, and I feel like, speaking of like something being hilarious, they really did the funny moments really well. Like, wanting to send the dad to jail to like stall, was I thought a really funny bit. Also, giving the dinosaur, who I believe is I think it's Aaron Shaw, right, who voices the dinosaur, the job of being the navigation voice is just hysterical. It's like a great a great choice. So I thought the funny moments of this were really great. You already talked about Tony Hale, who I thought was really funny as Forky as well, and even that like post credit scene where he's like, "I'm going to explain everything to you." The first question is, "How am I alive?" He's like, "I don't know." Like, just such a good extra credit scene for sure. There's a lot to like about this movie. Anything we didn't touch on that you think we should be shouting out?
A lot of good bits. I thought the Buzz Lightyear inner voice bit is set up really well, and actually used in a funny and effective way throughout the Buzz scenes. That was great. And then Key and Peele's presence as was it
Ducky and
something and Bunny? Yeah, they're just a new element, a new dynamic. As toys that have a different experience. Again, it's simple conceit, but we've seen bits of it before, and I think if you want to again dive deep into the Toy Story machinations, it's like not everyone has had the same experience as Woody and the gang,
Yep.
and you get a little bit of that once again for the guys that are carnival toys. You know, it's smartly well done, and even if you don't want to dig that deep, it's Key and Peele, so they're really fucking funny. And their shining moment, of course, is the bit where they try and woo the grandma in the antique shop, and that montage of sorts hilarious. So
Yeah, and just to kind of couple off your point a little bit about like a different experience, I'm forgetting. Maybe you mentioned it already of uh, someone leaving because of some issues and some possible controversy. But this is a much more diverse Toy Story movie than past ones have been, and just in terms
yep.
of people walking around, in terms of I think this is the first black voice actors they've had. If I'm
Uh,
remembering
for
correctly,
Pixar or Toy Story,
for
obviously,
Toy Story.
yeah,
Yeah,
Incredibles has Samuel Jackson.
right. And just I think this idea of like diversity and bringing in uh, other perspectives in terms of this toy world was just really smart and added a whole nother element to it. So shout out to them for being very 2019, or at least trying to be more 2019 than
Yeah, and that's kind of been the underlying thing in the industry is that while Pixar gets all these deserved accolades from parents and adult film critics alike, not to mention the kids who watch the movies, uh, Lasseter's presence throughout the studio for so many years really contributed to an overall boys club atmosphere at the studio, which has thousands of employees, of course. But Rashida Jones left the early script writing for Toy Story 4 over just the Lasseter's energy and the fact that the only woman director they ever hired was for Brave. They fired her. And having Coco in 2017 and now Toy Story 4 actually showing some stuff, it does feel like there's at least a bit of a new chapter at Pixar. Perhaps that's more of the Disney influence since they've taken over the studio years ago. Who knows? But better late than never, I guess, right?
absolutely. Toy Story 4, go see it. Maybe help out the box office a little bit if
Yeah,
you
please do.
um, anything people should be watching or listening to this coming weekday before we talk next time.
By the time you're hearing this, the Rich Brian album will probably be out. We're a big fan of him. We reviewed his Amen album last year. Excited for that. Also, on Friday, we get a new Black Keys record. Pretty exciting, following up the Raconteurs, that we're going to get more actual rockers coming back. I'm looking forward to that. Also, I'm very excited for Banana, the collaborative album from Freddie Gibbs and the producer, Madlib. These guys have a great track record thus far. Obviously, Madlib's a legend. So I'm excited as fuck for that. And then yesterday, the Danny Boyle film about the one guy who remembers the Beatles and takes advantage as a result will also be out. So plenty of stuff to talk about. Spider-Man Far From Home releasing early for the holiday weekend on Tuesday. So plenty of stuff as usual, sir.
Plenty of stuff. Also, if you are really digging the Mannequin Pussy album, the Raconteurs album, you're excited for the Black Keys, listen to Black Midi. Just released their debut album. UK-based guitar-driven band. Going to be a good listen. Gotten positive reviews so far. And potentially we'll also be talking about The Last Black Man in San Francisco if there's any showings by me, I'm hoping. So a lot to talk about. Subscribe, soundcloud.com/nowstalgiapod. Any way you want to catch the pod, especially help out our YouTube channel by subscribing there. Share us with friends. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week. Peace out.